Okay, so the next area we'll be focusing on is classroom management practices and procedures. So the practices and procedures here are very subjective and personal. So what do I mean by that? So I mean that they're not prescribed. You don't have to do them in a certain way, but rather it depends on your teaching style, your personality, and the way you like things to run. So you may not have a teaching style at the moment because you are new. Some of you are new teachers, but you'll develop it as time goes on. Then you will realize what type of practice and procedures you like in your classroom space and what you like to encourage. So see this part of the course is more of a framework and a guide rather than something that prescribes the way it has to be done. So as you get to know me, you'll understand that I really like the why question because I believe if we know the why of why we do something, it will help us to figure out how to do it. So why do we need practices and procedures in our classroom? So practice and procedures create safety for your students. Students need boundaries. I'm sure you've heard before. Students, adolescents, young children need boundaries. Boundaries help to create safety. So when they know exactly what is expected of them, what their teacher is going to do for them, what they need to do within the classroom space, they're going to feel safe. And if they feel safe, they'll be confident to respond and engage in activities within the classroom space, engage with the fellow learners because they understand exactly how things are supposed to work. Students know exactly what to do because you don't have constant questions. They might ask the same question over and over. Miss, what is the homework? Miss, where do we find the homework? Miss, where do we put our homework? If there's an actual procedure in place and there's a process in place and the routines are already set, they'll know exactly what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. It also saves you a lot of time. You don't have to answer the same question over and over. And it also allows you to get the work done, the learning to actually take place, which is why everyone is there for the learning to take place. So if we know what we do, which is your routine, and we know how to do it, and that is your procedure, then there's less disruptions, less kind of wasting time on things that don't really need focus, but rather it's more time to focus on your lesson plan, and importantly, on the relationships with your students. So children need structure and routine, not chaos. So children can't really work in chaos. Although sometimes it seems when they're playing it looks quite chaotic, children flourish better under structure and routine, and of course they must be allowed to have free play, but in terms of the classroom we need that structure and routine. The structure and routine, external structure and routine for young children and young people helps to develop internal structure. Now what do I mean by this? Children generally don't know how to structure time, how to structure activities because they are children. It's inherent in them to just do what they feel like doing because that's the part of the brain that is most is working most for them, is the part of the brain that is very in the here and now rather than for them to think about what they're doing and structure what they're doing. So we need to help them build internal structure. So how do we do this? This is by creating rules and procedures, routines that are flexible, healthy, and also going to consider the individual situation. I don't know if you've ever had this situation. I'm actually quite sure that you have. You have to balance what's happening in the class. You have to balance work, studies, family, relationships, and all these other social obligations. But then you have a list of activities that you have to get into, buy groceries, you have to do assignments, you have to get something for your kids, you have to get something for your partner, whatever the case is. Sometimes it just feels really overwhelming, but if you sit down and make a to-do list and actually tick off as you go along, the structure helps you to focus because you have to look at one thing at a time. So this is a little bit how we look at creating internal structure for children. It's putting everything that's all wrapping in their brain, watching PJ Masks and watching whatever other cartoon they're watching at the moment, that along with all the activities you expect them to remember, if we create a structure for them, they are able to focus and able to put those other things out of their mind and work on what needs to be done at this moment. And this is why we have structures and routines. So who creates practices and procedures? Historically, it was the teacher. The teacher decided on them and then they would just had to be followed. And then obviously schools fed into it as well because they would have, for example, like the pass system for the bathrooms. But nowadays, and I think what is quite nice nowadays and also quite important because we want to be more learner-centered, you can have your students come up with the ideas as well, and then you can then turn that into your practice and procedure so they feel involved. And when they feel involved in the structuring of these practices and procedures, obviously at the beginning of the year, they are more inclined, or they will be more inclined to follow what was co-defined or co-designed. It's also important maybe to get the voice of the parents in as well. They can help to set up these practices and procedures. But if you decide not to get the parents involved, at least let them know what the expectations are. Okay, so the previous quote was just to kind of get your mind wrapped around the concept. Okay, so you look at classroom rules and guidelines. So it's important to create and implement them from day one. So these aren't the specific rules that I'm giving you for your class, but rather just the thinking around the rules and guidelines. So create and implement them from day one so the children know exactly what is expected of them. Like I said previously, try to co-create the rules so students feel that they can buy into them. And please don't have endless lists, because the longer the list, the less inclined people are to follow them. And that's what research shows. So try to keep it short and sweet. And as long as it covers everything you want it to cover, make sure your rules are fair and reasonable, which is self-explanatory. And of course, if the rules are broken, how will you discipline learners? And please do this privately, because disciplining children in front of a whole class sometimes means that students are going to react and just act out of feeling embarrassed or act because they are angry. So think about the way you want to discipline your learners. So you put them around the classroom, maybe put them in the students' home diaries or homework diaries, because it needs to be seen. And the more it's seen, even though you think they're not paying attention, it's something that will kind of stick eventually. And of course, like I said earlier, try to share this with the parents and invite their input and hear what they also like to say. And encourage fun and humor in your class, because it doesn't always have to be so heavy. Sometimes we can have fun in our classroom space, and the fun is going to allow you to build that relationship with your learners. So we have to look at how to teach procedures, and the procedures that you need to focus on is like entering the classroom, leaving the classroom. What do we do when we ask questions? Do we put up our hand? How do we transition from activities from math to English, for example, if you're teaching more than one subject, or if they're walking to the next classroom? What is the expected procedure? And then also when we're outside of the classroom, in the hallway, in the school hall, in the playground, what is the expectation? And other things like if we want to sharpen our pencil, what do we just get up and go to the bin? All these small things, collecting papers, all these small things need to be thought about. When do we hand in homework? How do we hand in homework? Just so you can create the proper structure. Because you need to spend a lot of time during the first few weeks of school to introduce this, to obviously model it and to practice your procedures. And you're going to have to continue this quite a number of times for it to become a routine. And so your routine is really something that your students can perform without even thinking about. So it's just something that they do because they know that's what must be done. But if you do see that your students are not doing it, then try to reteach it again, offer them feedback, try to rehearse it with them, ask another student in the class to show them and remind them about it. And then just keep reminding. Don't try to really get onto a student all the time. Say, okay, class, how about I remind you what our practice and procedure is? And that's like a nicer way to get your student to remember it, rather than pinpointing and say, you know what, you're not listening. Try to kind of not single out kids too much. So this isn't something official, but this is something that I put together from various readings that I've done about how to introduce a procedure. So I would say the first step is obviously introducing and explaining the procedure. What is the procedure? Why do we need the procedure? When will it be used? And so on and so forth. Then you model it. So show them exactly what it looks like, what it sounds like, what the expectation is. Then you have to practice. So continuously practicing it and show them the expectation. And then, of course, as I said earlier, remind, reinforce all the time, because sometimes learners are not going to pay attention the first 5 times. Sometimes it's going to take 7 to 14, 15 times, and the research shows that young children do need things to be shown to them a couple of times for it to become habit. A lot more than 17 times actually, but in the classroom, hopefully because there are so many learners, they're going to learn a little bit faster. So just a couple of reminders that we've mentioned in this video and in previous videos as well, just around consistency and relationships. So please remember that they are quite important as well. And then ideas around which procedures you should establish. These are just the basics, but you as a teacher will decide on the own procedures that you would like to see within your classrooms. Things like, besides emergency procedures, how do we hand in homework? When do we hand in homework? And those types of things, because some schools have homework journals. Then in terms of behavior challenges, there are many reasons for disruptive behavior. These are not all. So Shaw from 2003, or in his work from 2003, talks about attention seeking is when students perhaps if they feel ignored or they feel like they've been put on the spot sometimes, they feel like they're not important in the classroom. So those are the type of things you have to think about when your students are misbehaving. Don't just think that they're just being naughty, or sometimes there are reasons. Sometimes kids are hungry, sometimes they're tired and they misbehave. We really need to see our kids as young human beings that do have needs, and they're not just acting because they're trying to make our life difficult. Sometimes that their behavior is trying to tell us something, and it's up to you to decide what exactly they're trying to tell you. So these are just some that you could put around, some things you could put around in the classroom, ideas about what other teachers have used and do use in their classroom spaces. So feel free to copy something and do something similar in your classroom. I'm going to talk about an example of a classroom procedure now, or an arrival procedure. These are one of the procedures, and this is an arrival procedure. So I'm not going to actually go into too much detail because it will be part of your assessment, but I'm going to give you a quick example. So as you can see here, this is a teacher that is standing outside the classroom, and all the learners are ready to come into the classroom. So the procedure number 1 will talk about how you want your learners to be standing in the line. The next procedure is, do you, the teacher, greet every learner? Do you have a special hand greeting for them, a special high five? Moving into the classroom, do we put our bags at a specific space? Do we go sit down immediately, or do we sit on the carpet? Then do we have music while we're busy to getting seated and getting done? Some teachers like to play music to get everyone settled. I, for example, have started most groups of mine with breathing, and sometimes light music as they enter, and then breathing, and that is how we start. And then is the first thing that they look at for the day, the objectives. What are we learning today? What is the various things we have to consider? Or is it you talking to them and giving them like an introduction to the day? So that's just one example of one procedure in your classroom. I like this. I've seen this in many classrooms. But on your board, you may want to have some things that are not erased. And so this could be, this could be your whiteboard, and your day of the week and your date, month, and year could go on this corner. And then you could have a space where you put homework. Sorry for those lines extending. They can be quite distracting, and my OCD is getting activated. But okay, so homework for tomorrow could always be placed on this corner of the board. What I must remember, so for example, must I remember to give my mom a letter, must I remember to return a letter, and so on. Announcements, anything exciting happening, someone's birthday is coming up, or Easter is coming up, or those types of things, sports, etc. Then the topic for the day, some teachers like to have a topic for the day or topic of the week. What are our objectives? Then a PDN, which is a please do now. What should they do when they enter the classroom? So sometimes kids will enter the classroom and know, okay, I must look at the PDN. The PDN says I must take out my homework book. So without you even saying anything, the kids already know what to do. And then activities for the day, you can put it down there, and possibly with how much time it will take. So this is one of the ways to make your procedures easier, is to have it on the board as a daily routine and a daily reminder. Okay, and lastly, I think it's important that we learn to share within our classroom spaces. If you are a more experienced teacher, or even if you're a younger teacher and you have a good idea, try to share it with your colleagues and have your colleagues share their ideas with you. It really helps to see other people's perspectives and ideas. So don't feel like, I don't want to seem that I'm inexperienced, or I don't want to share my information. Try to collaborate, because collaborating does make a huge difference. And also your learners can see if there's a good camaraderie and a good kind of spirit within the school space, where teachers feel comfortable to speak to each other and ask each other questions. Remember, we can teach all we want and talk to our kids all we want, but modeling behavior is definitely the best way for our learners to learn. Even your children at home, the learners that you have in your classroom, and children in general, what they see you do is going to stick with them a lot more than what you tell them to do. Because what they see is generally what they know you do, what they think you expect. Okay, so these are just the references that I'm going to put up here from where I got my information from. You're welcome to go and look at them and find out exactly if there's any other information around practice and procedures that you'd like to look at. And this is a bit of a list that I have compiled for the references for this slide specifically. So good luck with this module, this unit in the module. If you have any questions, please feel free to message me. I've also uploaded 2 other documents for you to view on this. One is an example of classroom management procedures, and the other one is just kind of 17 tips around classroom procedures. So good luck, and I look forward to reading your assessments and assignment.